just going to give a shout out to Atlantis, because Atlantis is connected to Egypt because centuries ago Atlantis was in some sort of war, or the island sank, which is the story that comes out, and the people that was there were more advanced than others, and they travelled the world after the island or ship, or whatever you want to call it, was destroyed, and they went to Egypt, and Egyptians then told the story of that to someone that Plato knew a couple of 100 or 1,000 years later, and then Plato wrote about it. But there's a person called Edgar Cayce who is a clairvoyant, or was a clairvoyant, and he spoke frequently of Atlantis, and a lot of the things he said came true. Now, he also said that underneath the Sphinx was the Hall of Records. Now, the Hall of Records is literally records of absolutely everything, and I'll talk about. I hope to tell you what Atlantis was and who was in it. I know there's so many stories out there that it was different races and the Lemurians, etc., etc., but we have to go by the ancient texts. Now, I know I've said this many times before, but the ancient text, hundreds of thousands of these found in the 1800s, and they all have a complete narrative. They're brand new text, language that actually has Aramaic, Babylonian, etc., that follow on from that. So we have to agree these are real. So now we know they're real. The Anunnaki actually say in their tablets that they build their cities in circles, which is very interesting, because when you go to Plato's description, they're in concentric circles. So the Anunnaki actually also build. Now, the Anunnaki were around when the Atlanteans would have been around. So the Anunnaki never wrote about another alien race whatsoever. So we can only then assume that it was the Anunnaki. Now, there were different factions at this time. So this was the time when Ra was Marduk. Marduk turned into Ra and had issues with Iana. And all these different locations had different factions of groups. Enlil's groups, Enki's groups, and obviously their offsprings ended up creating their own groups, and so there was so many different factions. So what happened is Iana managed to persuade Enlil. Enki agreed, but he thought no one would know where the nuclear weapons were. So if you watch my other videos, you'll see that there was nuclear weapons brought by Alalula when he first arrived. Enlil knew where they were. So anyway, Iana managed to persuade them to try and blow up, yes, Marduk. However, they didn't succeed. But what they did do with the 7 nuclear weapons is wipe out many of these type of locations, and we know that because there's here it says researchers find proof of ancient atomic war. That's in Mesopotamia, in India as well. So we know that there was these atomic explosions, and even the Bible talks about flesh rotting, etc., etc. So we know roughly the time that happened because of researchers, plus obviously the time that the book talks about Iana wanting to attack Ra. So the logic is that it was one of those cities that got destroyed by one of those missiles, rockets, nukes, and it just makes sense. Wow, we now know who the Atlanteans are, thanks to my last video. After 30 years of research, I think I concluded it quite successfully. No one's debunked it. And so the Atlanteans basically were the Aigigi, which were the young Anunnaki, which, if you don't know who the Anunnaki are, please go and watch my videos or do some research. So basically, the Aigigi were warned, along with the other cities that were about to be destroyed, to vacate the cities. Now, the cities that the Anunnaki built are in circles, and that's exactly what Plato said. Now, the Aigigi were Anunnaki, even though they were the younger ones, and they had technology. So when they left and travelled to Egypt, they would then tell their story that their city's just been destroyed, which makes sense. So if you're interested in finding out more, watch the previous video to this, or start from video 1 onwards, because hey, you know the Egyptian god Ra? Well, he was actually Marduk, as you probably already know. And he was, at this time in my videos, I'm doing it in order, but at this time he was being attacked by the rest of the Anunnaki because he was trying to take over the planet. and they used their terror weapons, which was basically some sort of nuclear weapons, which was proof of if you watch my previous videos. And he was lucky because he went to a place called Babili, and the winds from the radiation didn't actually go there. They blew the opposite direction. So he was saved after all of these annihilation of cities. And Enlil and Enki had a meeting, and they said, what's going on? And Enlil said to him, actually, Gaozu already told me about this in a dream, told me everything that was going to happen. Enki was like, really? Why didn't you tell us? And Enlil was, well, you know, destiny, this, that and the other. So guess what happens next? Follow and watch. We have to go back to the original source. We can't trust someone from the 1900s who wrote a book about Lemurians, etc., etc. And we can't, sadly, we can't trust people that sit in armchairs, close their eyes and tell us about Lemurians and blue people and things that we cannot verify. So we have to go back to the original text. And the original text talk about basically the Anunnaki creating cities in circles. Now this is supposedly what Atlantis looks like. And this is what a Mesopotamian city looks like. In other words, the Anunnaki city. So I think the only researcher that's actually put these two together. So now the ancient texts talk about Atlantis as in an advanced race. Now the advanced race is compared to the Egyptian, who they were talking to about leaving Atlantis and going to Egypt. So it's not an advanced race as in an alien race. It was the Anunnaki. Still talking about the Emerald Tablets of Thoth. Now I'm going to read out another passage and I'm going to give you my thoughts on it. Take thou, O Thoth. Now bear in mind, Thoth was Ningazida in Anunnaki. All of your wisdom, take all of your records, take all of your magic. Go thou forth as a teacher of men. Go thou forth, reserving the records until in time light grows among men. In other words, take your knowledge and your devices, etc., and don't let men see them until men are smart enough. Light being knowledge. And then it goes on. Light shall be thou be through all the ages, hidden yet found by the enlightened men, like we are right now, the people listening to this, all over earth. Give we ye power, fill thou to give or take it away. Gather thou now the sons of Atlantis, take them and flee to the people of the rock caves. So in other words, he's been warned off of Atlantis. Now if you've watched my previous videos, you'll see that Atlantis really was just another Anunnaki city. So to be warned off, now why would he have done that? Well, I've already mentioned in previous videos that they were, Ninurta was going around to bomb up some of these locations. So they warned him off, which makes a lot of sense. So I'm probably going to have to put some more of these videos on my Patreon, only because I put one up a minute ago and it just got taken straight back down because I'm obviously talking about dead things in some of my videos to do with the Book of Thoth, because it is talking about you know, reincarnation, etc. And so I'm guessing that's what happened. So I'm afraid the next few of these will be on my Patreon page. Sorry, and that's Our True History on Patreon. Sorry, I'm just doing it because I don't want my channel to be pulled. Breaking news, you're going to hear this first from me, and then eventually other people will start copying me. So this is a scan of a city, buried city in Bolivia, Amazon. And this city is built in concentric circles, as you can probably see there. This is obviously underground, hidden, but it's been picked up by lasers, etc. Now if you look at the concentric circles, where else have you heard of concentric circles? Yes, Atlantis. Now if you've watched my previous videos, you will know that I am the person that has told you who was on Atlantis. And if we go one step further from the concentric circles to a Sumerian city, wow, doesn't that look the same as the other two? Obviously that's all buried and everything else, but there is in concentric circles. So once again, Our True History has matched the Anunnaki to be in the Bolivian area. I love a good conspiracy, but I still can't believe people think that dinosaurs never existed. First of all, what benefit would there be in creating fake bones and then making up different creatures around the world? For what benefit? I don't see the logic in that. But it's not always paid for people that actually find the dinosaur bones. There's, for example, there's a 12-year-old boy out here that actually spotted some dinosaur bones, and a girl spotted dinosaur footprints. And the first dinosaur bones was actually found in 1677. So what do you think they'd done? Do you think they thought, do you know what, in 1677, do you think they thought, oh, let's make up some bones and ring round all the other museums around the world? Well, actually, telephones didn't come into existence until 200 years later. So they would have had to have hoped that everyone for 200 years would have gone along with their lies. Crazy. The Eye of Sahara, some people believe it's Atlantis. It's not. First of all, there is no evidence whatsoever of any civilization there other than just rocks going up in a formation. This was also in Africa here, whereas the Anunnaki, which were the Atlanteans, if you watch my previous video, I conclude successfully that they were. The Anunnakis at any one point was down here in South Africa, what they called the Abzu. And even mainstream say that the Eye of Sahara was, they believe, formed when Pangaea started to pull apart. Pangaea, we're talking millions and millions of years ago, whereas Atlantis was 3,000 to 5,000 years ago. There's a difference of millions of years. And even Plato admits that it was sunk, whereas as you can clearly see there in the picture, it's not sunk. And also the emerald tablets of Thoth also say it was sunk. So there is no evidence whatsoever that the Eye of Sahara is Atlantis. I did a video a while back talking about the Rishat structure, which is also known as the Eye of Sahara, where someone on YouTube was saying that this was definitely more than likely Atlantis, because it has concentric circles. And I did a video saying that I've done a video on Patreon, a lot longer one, 15 minutes, explaining all the reasons why that person was wrong. But I still get people saying, no, it's definitely the right place, because look, it's got circles, even though there's zero evidence whatsoever of any structures, buildings, skeletons or anything. And I'm trying to say to people, look, the Anunnaki built their cities in circles. Each one of these is a different ancient circled city. There's one, there's another one, there's another one, in different locations. So please just bear that in mind next time everyone says that the Rishat structure. No, Anunnaki built their cities in concentric circles. The video you've all been waiting for, the Greek person Plato and his story of Atlantis. Well, if you've watched my other videos, you know that I've mentioned who was on Atlantis. In other words, there was a place, in my opinion. However, over the next few videos, I'm going to be showing you why you cannot believe what was written by Plato about Atlantis. So even though I sort of contradict myself by saying there was such a place, I'm actually explaining in the next few videos why people are crazy to actually read his writings and believe anything else other than that there was a place. In this video I'm going to be explaining why I think Atlantis is real, and in the next video I'll be explaining why you can't believe 99% of what Plato said. Now, the reason why I believe it's real is because the description of Atlantis is given that it's in concentric circles. If you've watched my previous videos, you know that the Anunnaki built their cities in concentric circles. So is that a coincidence that Plato, some 9,000 years after the supposed Atlantis was around, actually guessed that concentric circles was how the Anunnaki built their cities? The actual date here of when Plato wrote about it was 360 BC, but he's referring in his writings to around 9,000 years before that. Now, if you go along with the Emerald Tablets of Thoth, which is an early rendition of what it looked like, the dates match. Why you can't believe exactly what Plato says. Basically, I won't go and bore you with who said what and when, but over a very long period of time, 9,000 years, supposedly somewhere in Egypt, there was writings on a wall about Atlantis. Now, this was then told to someone by priests in Egypt, who then eventually, very long story, loads of different people involved, but basically Plato ended up with the information and then wrote about it. So we're talking a span of 9,000 years to remember everything that someone said. So have a look at this, and this is some of the information that's in there. Now some of the information does ring true. This is why I said you can't believe 100%. So for example, where it says that the gods split up the land, now if you go back to Sumerian texts, they did do that. They drew straws, and also in ancient Greece, Zeus, etc. also split up the lands. So let's have a listen to how much information was passed down that would have supposedly been written on Egyptian walls.
There was a plain which is said to have been the fairest of all plains and very fertile. Near the plain again, and also in the centre of the island at a distance of about 50 stadia, there was a mountain, not very high.
Okay, you can believe that they wrote that.
Dwelt all round, making alternate zones of sea and land, larger and smaller.
Okay, you could believe that was
one
written.
Of warm water and the other of cold, and making every variety of food to spring up abundantly from the soil.
Okay, starting to get a lot of information there on written walls.
Now, Atlas had a numerous and honourable family, and they retained the kingdom, the eldest son handing it on to his eldest son for many generations. And they,
as you see, I'm going
animals,
along here.
Both those which live in lakes and marshes and rivers, and also for those who live in mountains and on plains.
This is all supposedly written on a tablet on a wall.
Every king surpassing the one who went before him to the utmost of his power, until they made the building a marvel to behold. Which the palace was situated had a diameter of 5 stadia. All this, including the zones and the bridge, which...
So you really think they put the measurements on a hieroglyphics on a wall in a temple somewhere in Egypt that we've never found, that then someone had to remember all of this to give it to someone else that gave it, eventually got to Plato? Seriously? There's just too much information.
The palaces in the interior of the citadel were constructed on this wise. In the centre was a holy temple dedicated to Plato and Poseidon, which remained inaccessible and was surrounded...
I mean, this just goes on, as you can see. We're only halfway through, so too much information to be true.